I'm fascinated with the Middle Ages, and I really started getting into it about 6 years ago and kind of bring it into the classroom. So let's just do a little mini lesson on the Middle Ages. What do you say? Well, first of all, it was called the Middle Ages because it was in the middle of the fall of the Roman Empire and the Renaissance, from approximately the 5th to the 15th centuries. And of course, people didn't consider themselves in the middle of anything. That was later named the Middle Ages because it was deemed medieval times or the Dark Ages, which was convenient for them because the historians, I mean, because then, they looked at this 1,000 years of history and just said it was the Dark Ages because there was no learning taking place, no real learning, because the learning was controlled by the church. I'd like to make a little side note about the church. Personally, I like to distinguish between the philosophy of the Catholic Church at the time and the political and economic history of the church, which has been acknowledged by popes such as John Paul II, who has formally made apologies for the Inquisition, the Crusades, the slave trade, and everyone else who suffered under the hands of the Catholic Church that he spoke of, specifically talking about women, Jews, and Muslims. So anyway, I just like to make that distinction. So there you have it. So with that being said, I kind of tried to recreate the wheel, and I've just written this up on a board in my classroom in the past, but I asked students to say, what did the church control during the Middle Ages? Just brainstorm as many things as you can. And I don't think that we can quite see the wheel there, so I made a little kind of a bingo chart of the same categories. And I think what I was trying to emphasize was that the church had basically control of the military, trade, the economy, taxation, education, agriculture, food, art, laws, science, medicine, sports, clothing, architecture, communication, entertainment, technology, transportation, division of labor, and a lifestyle. So what? Well, in logic, I've learned and like to teach what's called a hypothetical syllogism. But I kind of stole it, like I just steal a lot of ideas, and I just call it Newton's law hypothesis. Rather presumptuous of me, don't you think? But anyway, I just kind of like to frame an argument in a 3-point proposition, and it's just called if, and therefore. But what I like to do if I want to make a point is I like to make a hypothesis, which is the if, and then I like to just come up with at least 3 points of, let's say, points of evidence or primary documents, some kind of proof or evidence to kind of back up my hypotheses or refute it. And I think when I talk about an argument, I'm not talking about the yelling that people talk about. What I mean is wanting to get to the truth. And so when I put out these hypotheses, I want to get at some kind of truth. And so I have to be willing to be able to say, what, I was wrong. I didn't come up with sufficient evidence. Ultimately, I want you to make your own decisions. And for me, I just like to kind of throw out some of these ideas. And so let's just test it. So if, let's say my hypothesis is the church had, let's say, significant impact on the daily lives of subjects within the Roman Empire. And my bingo slide has, there's a lot of research I can do, but we could start with the power was an all-consuming presence in the Middle Ages with the sale of indulgences, promising absolution, the doctrine of church sanctuary, which was to promise salvation into heaven for money, the power that they had over the rich at that time, even kings and queens feared the wrath of the church because the church, they pled their allegiance to them. And the church paid no taxes. The Inquisition, the Crusades. Anyway, I like to come up with 3 really substantial points of evidence. and then come up with my own conclusions, not ones that you think you come up with. Again, I have to be willing to affirm a hypothesis or negate it. And so I have to be open to that. Well, I don't have to be, but I like to be. And so my conclusion was, yeah, the church was mostly responsible for an all-consuming presence, a corrupt presence during the Middle Ages. And sometimes my conclusions actually lead me to more questions and more hypotheses. And so in this case, I just wanted to see, who holds the major control today. And so in my wheel, I kept the other cards there, but I just changed the center one from church to corporations. And again, just testing this hypothesis. So I would ask myself, does corporate power exist? Do corporations hold control today, just like the church did in the Middle Ages? So once again, I tested military, trade, the economy, taxation, education, agriculture, food, art, laws, science, medicine, sports, clothing and image, architecture, communication, entertainment, technology, transportation, division of labor, and lifestyle. Now, I think it's important, at least for me as a historian, to, I get excited about making these comparisons, but I also need to kind of step back and understand historical perspective. So even though I can make, I think, some comparisons between, people who we look up to, the focus, the hierarchy, love, relationship, and marriage and family, and even the plague. I remember having some really lively discussions with students about within the last 5 or 6 years, because I kept thinking about the comparisons, and even up till this year, I remember talking to students and joking in a kind of a sadistic way maybe, and I said, yeah, now our comparisons, now we share the plague too. So funny, not so funny, I guess. Now what? Well, I like to stop the world. And as I was doing my research, I found this angry Santa satire post that I just thought was kind of interesting. And while I was researching the Middle Ages, I kept getting this pop-up ad that just looked like the satire poster that I was... Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. And then, this American flag with corporations instead of stars. I think whoever came up with that is trying to make some kind of statement. And then at the bottom left is, this is from a video called The Whitest Kids You Know. And they did a satire spoof on the Pledge of Allegiance. And essentially the Pledge of Allegiance, they're saying to corporations. So these ideas are out there for sure. For sure. And if we are dependent on corporations for education, and corporations maintain their power through education by promising, future riches if you work hard enough, do enough homework, same kind of, into some kind of promised land, manipulating curriculum in favor of corporations, for example, teaching economics. And I think we should really question, the foundation for teaching economics. When I was doing some research, I thought it was really interesting that I couldn't find how it was funded. There's a lot of free resources for teaching economics through this, and I've used it in the past myself personally, and I thought, a little bit more skeptical these days. And so, through a long story, it took me hours, but it's through a subsidiary of another foundation that was founded by the Koch brothers, who definitely have an agenda in education. Anyway. Phew. There are, I think, 328.2 million people in the United States. And so if corporations dominate education, and education influences relatively 90% of the population, well, I guess you can do your own homework. It's for anybody and for nobody at all. So find out for yourself. Just stop the world. Watch a commercial. Decide what and how. Zero in on an idea, but you think about it. You make the decision. I'm just kind of throwing out this hypothesis, this theory, but what's important is that you think about it. Great, but I don't know. Does anybody wonder about the snails? So it's a mystery, really, for another day. Ciao.